I want to pivot to the resettlement landscape. And, these slides get to kind of where we stand as a resettlement network at USCCB MRS, but additionally, as we look at the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program, what's happening and what are the implications here at headquarters and at the local level. So right now, the executive order has proposed a reduction in FY17 arrivals from 110,000 refugees to 50,000. As you all know, the executive order, which was introduced by the Trump administration, we are now under a preliminary injunction, which allows us to continue to resettle refugees until that court process can be completed. We still remain unsure of the number of refugees that will be resettled this fiscal year, and if that number will actually increase over the 50,000 that we are currently working under. So there's uncertainty regarding the FY17 and FY18 presidential determination, and this does have an impact on the resettlement support centers, which are overseas. These are the entities that are responsible for processing refugees and ensuring that those individuals are able to arrive here into the United States, as well as the local resettlement affiliates that are working at the local level to welcome refugees to their communities. Now, RSCs, we have already noticed that RSCs are reducing the total number of staff that they have working on the ground to produce dossiers and case files for refugees, given the new projections. And also, we have seen that some affiliates have also reduced their capacity to resettle the total number of refugees, given that they are expecting a reduction in their total number for FY17 as well as FY18. And what we may see is that if there is an increase in the determination and the total number of refugees that are allowed to come into the country, that we may have to dialogue with our affiliates within the network to increase their capacity once again to absorb that increased capacity. Lastly, just looking at the numbers holistically, we have approximately 40,000 refugees arrived in the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program to date. The largest number of arrivals are from Africa and Near East South Asia. Now, more specifically, the Africa region has resettled the Africa region has about 28,000 refugees which are approved by DHS, but conversely, we have about 4,300 which are travel ready. And looking at the Near East South Asia region, we have about 21,000 refugees approved by DHS, but only about 6,700 which are travel ready. Our concern here is that DHS at this time is not allowed to go into resettlement camps and adjudicate, approve, or deny cases. So we are asking or wondering if the numbers of refugees which are DHS approved will decrease as the total number of refugees which are booked to travel continues to flow over the course of the fiscal year. We also are wondering if those individuals which are travel ready will become more convoluted and more difficult to increase that number, given that there is uncertainty around the security screening process and how that may change over the course of FY17 and into FY18. Okay. Mark, can you go to the next slide for me? Thank you. Lastly, we have certain groups that we wanted to pay attention to and highlight in the presentation today. First and foremost, the U.S. Thai population. We have about 65% of all refugee cases which are classified as U.S. Thai. And a majority of those U.S. Thais are from Muslim nations, Iraq, Somalia, Afghanistan, for example. In some, we have about 17,800 individuals which have relatives and friends in the U.S. Largest states include Ohio, California, Illinois, Michigan, Minnesota, New York, Texas, and Washington. Should be no surprise to the listeners today. But our concern around the U.S. Thai caseload is that we look at the executive order and we know that there is the potential for certain relatives, which are refugees overseas, that may be inhibited from coming and joining family members and friends here in the U.S. So, for example, we could have a situation where a single mother is living in Lansing, Michigan, and waiting for her son, who is working age, to come and join her as she works to support 3 children, which are non-working age. And so the implications of having family members reunited is very important and something that we continue to work on with the State Department. Next, we have the Central American minors population. Only about 25 to 30% of the total number of approvals are refugees. The rest of the Central American minors have been approved as parolees. And there is attention that's being paid to the parolee designation that has been given, and the concern around the fact that 70% of all CAM cases have been approved as parole, and what will happen with that program as we continue to dialogue and work with the new administration. Lastly, the special immigrant visa category. SIVs are projected to be at around 18,000 for FY17. Originally, at the beginning of the fiscal year, we anticipated that this number would be around 7,000. For FY18, it's being projected at 7,000 arrivals for the year. And so, looking at history, we can tell that the total number of SIVs that have been approved and the actual number that have been resettled has a significant disparity between those two totals. And so we anticipate that in FY18 we'll be looking at a much larger number than 7,000 SIV arrivals, which bodes well for those sites which are locations which SIVs would like to travel to and join family members and friends. And one of the things that we're working on as a resettlement agency headquarters is trying to solidify new locations of resettlement for SIVs. We're having mixed results with that, given the fact that SIVs want to go to specific locations, specifically California, Texas, and Northern Virginia. That's all I have now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Darwincy. And folks, you know, we do want to make this interactive, and I know that, you know, you might have questions already, or you're going to have some questions coming up based on the presentations. So if you, there you go, there's a question now. If you do have any questions, please type it in the chat box in the lower left-hand corner of your screen, and we'll get to as many of these questions as we can. We'll try to, you know, depending on how many there are, we'll try to group them together so that we can, you know, we can answer them without having to go through it. So, Darwincy, looks like there is a question here from Anthony Camino. Can you explain what an SIV is?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Tony. So very quickly, SIVs are individuals from Iraq and Afghanistan. These are individuals who have aided and assisted the U.S. military efforts in those countries. So essentially what the U.S. government did was they created a program for this specific category, given the sacrifice that these two nationalities had made on behalf of the U.S. So there is a kind of a fast tracking which happens with SIVs, given that they can facilitate their own travel to the U.S. after they have their visa in hand. Also, they receive their green card about 4 to 8 weeks after arrival. In contrast, refugees have to wait a full year. So there's a little bit of a different kind of framework for special immigrant visas in comparison to refugees.
Great. Thanks, Darwincy. Here's another question. What is the U.S. tie case?
Yeah, so U.S. ties are individuals which have friends and relatives that are located in the U.S. So refugees, which are being processed in countries overseas, they can articulate through the adjudications process, and while they are having a dossier which is being created, they can articulate that they have a friend or refugee that is located in the U.S. that they would like to join. These can be, close family relatives. These can be friends, which, have only met a few times. So there can be a very large array of the relationships that exist. But the State Department and the resettlement agencies want to make sure that family unification is the critical aspect or component of refugee resettlement, and that if a refugee overseas has a family member or friend that's based in the country, that they're able to join that individual.
Very good. Thank you, Darwinski. And again, folks, if you have any questions, please just type it into the chat box, and we'll get to them as we're proceeding with the webinar. Next up is going to be Todd Scribner. Again, he's the education coordinator here at Migration and Refugee Services at the USCCB. Todd, are you on?
I'm here, yes.
Okay, good. Hand off the ball to you, Todd.
Thanks so much. And thanks so much, Tony, for the introduction and for having JFI host this webinar. And thanks to Darwinski for giving a great overview of where we are and what we're confronting a little bit in the in the current situation and what we're looking forward to in the coming years. Mark, if you could forward the slide. So I want to turn attention to a little bit more of a narrow focus, I suppose, rather than looking at what's going on the ground now in a kind of broader resettlement kind of context. We're looking at a World Refugee Day. World Refugee Day every year is celebrated on June 20th. And so over the past couple of months, we've begun preparations for a USCCB and MRS's engagement with World Refugee Day for this year. And this is sort of one of the first public events that we're holding to kind of highlight the refugee resettlement system and also to highlight World Refugee Day for 2017. It's an opportunity for the church and for secular organizations which also celebrate it. This isn't a religious celebration, as is something like National Migration Week, which we hold every January. It's a sort of a UNHCR, broad sort of focused celebration. But it provides us an opportunity to look at the situation confronting vulnerable refugees around the world, whether it's in the Middle East or Africa or Central America or Asia. We have a chance to kind of turn our attention, even if just for a day or for a series of days, to bring to light what they're confronting and, sort of provide opportunities to kind of brainstorm about what we can do to help protect them and provide them support as we move forward. And we're trying to make it more than a day, obviously, because we're launching it in April, our look at it. And one of the things that we're doing beyond this webinar is we've developed a toolkit that'll give us an opportunity to kind of reach out into the Catholic communities in particular and, show some of the things that we're trying to do and give that some resources to people who celebrate World Refugee Day and who are interested in refugee-related issues they can kind of fall back on it. We did something similar for National Migration Week. We developed a toolkit. Many of you may have been on the webinar that we held back in, I think it was November of last year, and hopefully use the toolkit if you were able to do so in your parish or your local community. And so we're doing the same thing for this year for World Refugee Day. Regarding a theme, we're still sort of sitting on our hands a little bit, waiting for a theme to come to us. One of the things that we've been trying to do is engage United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. They often develop a theme that they use sort of to frame World Refugee Day. They have in the past, in years past. At this point in time, they haven't developed such a theme, and we wanted to use that if they did come up with one, and if they're planning to use one, to try and to create some kind of continuity between different organizations who are interested in refugees and refugee resettlement. And so we'll wait a little bit longer to see if they come out with a theme for this year's World Refugee Day. If they don't, then we will probably come up with one on our own, toward the end of April or the beginning of May, and we'll be able to get word out to you as to what that is. But currently we're kind of in a holding pattern because we haven't heard back from UNHCR as to whether or not they're going to be developing anything. It's just sort of a heads up for you all. Next slide. Mark? Thank you. So regarding the toolkit, I just want to highlight a few aspects of it. There are many of the traditional things that we often, people often request of us. There are some general talking points as to how you can speak about refugees and the situation confronting them. If you're on congressional visits or if you're talking to an elected official, what kinds of things are worth mentioning and highlighting to try and drive home the point regarding, the plight that refugees face and the difficulties that they face oftentimes, and the importance of the refugee resettlement system and the need to protect and promote it over the long term. This includes appropriations issues, protection issues, what the United States can do in terms of the resettlement, but also what they can do overseas to help to provide protections for refugees who aren't in the process of being resettled. In addition to talking points, we've trying to promote some various aspects regarding engaging the media on the local and the national level. It's really, really important, I think, to raise the issue of refugees and refugee resettlement on the local level. To write letters to the editor, for example, in your newspaper. Maybe even write an op-ed if you're able to do so. To try and raise the profile of this kind of local media is very important. Number one, simply to educate the community within which you live. A lot of people aren't familiar with the issue. And if you talk to them, they get their news through various outlets, and it may not be accurate. So this gives you an opportunity in engaging the media to help educate people. It's also good, just quite frankly, for advocacy purposes. If congressmen and women who they're engaged on the local level and they know what's going on in the local newspapers, the issues that are of interest. And if we can raise the profile on the local level through the media and other mechanisms, we're able to kind of raise a profile in the eyes of your representatives and other elected officials, which can have important implications as we move forward. In addition to kind of traditional media, there are social media aspects that we're also interested in, including Facebook and Twitter. So in the toolkit we have suggestions for what you can do in terms of tweets, sample Facebook posts, so on and so forth as we move toward World Refugee Day. In addition to these typical things, we have prayer resources. Obviously, there are sample intentions, for example, that you can use in prayer services and at masses that highlight refugees and their situation and lift them up. One of the things that we plan on doing as we move forward in the coming weeks is to add more resources on our website that are prayer and spirituality focused. So it would be prayers, it may be more intentions, it may be pulpit sort of things that people can say from the pulpit, homily notes. There's a whole array of things that we're hoping to develop and to push out through our Justice for Immigrants website in particular. Finally, there are issues related to community engagement. It's sort of, we got to take action. If we want to protect the system, we got to do things in order to make sure that it's protected, because there's a lot of people out there who don't want it to be protected and who want to undermine its long-term stability. And obviously, we're not in a position where we want that to happen. We want to do just the opposite. And so it's important to take action. And so we have a section in the toolkit that highlights, engaging your members of Congress, what you can do and how you can do it, as well as how you can become active in your community. And I want to close with a few examples of what you can do in all of these cases. So Mark, if you can go to the next slide. So one of the the real effective ways in which you can become involved in sort of refugee resettlement and refugee-related issues is to get involved in your local parish's organized to welcome refugees program, if you have one on the local level. It's a POWER program is sort of how we refer to it. And it's sort of been launched by USCCB MRS, I believe it was back in 2010, 2011. And what we've done is we've provided funding to local level sort of parishes and communities to try and create programs that will welcome refugees into the community. This is really important on the one hand because it shows a kind of welcoming spirit. It makes them feel at home, after a very difficult life and a difficult transition into a new place and a new culture. This kind of engagement through a POWER program type situation helps people to feel at home. It also helps in the process of integration. It helps to raise up refugees in the ways in which they can contribute to the local community. So it has a lot of benefits. A lot of the there are a number of dioceses out there who have power programs. If you don't have a power program, you can go to our website and do a little research on it. Daniel Sturm, who runs the power program here, I'm sure would be very interested in hearing from you and providing you more information as to how you can get involved in a power program in your local area if it doesn't already exist. And his email is dsturm@usccb.org. We may be able to provide some more information on the JFI website as well, so that you can tap into it if you're interested in doing so. Can I get the next slide, Mark? Obviously, the spiritual resources and prayer services are a really important aspect of what we do. We're not just, secular actors who advocate on Capitol Hill or through in-district visits, as much as that is important, but prayer is clearly central to our mission as a church. It helps to shape culture, it helps to shape hearts, and it draws attention in a way that is powerful and positive to the issues with which USCCB MRS is interested in, and which the bishops across the nation espouse and uphold. So, again, we have resources, and we'll have more resources that will help you to do this on your local level and in your parishes, and we'd certainly invite you to do so and hope that you will. Next slide, Mark. Okay, so of course, as well, as I said, you can do prayer services, and we need to also take action, and reach out to our local representatives and our elected officials. And one of the ways in which you can do that is by organizing or participating in an in-district visit. When Congress is not in session and congressional leaders go back to their districts, this is a really good opportunity for you to reach out to them directly and to engage them, set up meetings, and do some really forthright activities in this regard. I know it's difficult, and because a lot of people haven't been involved in direct advocacy, reaching out and setting up meetings. And so one of the things that we've tried to do more and more here at the USCCB, both in MRS and Justice, Peace, and Human Development, and in partnership with other organizations like Catholic Relief Services and Catholic Charities, is to try and create resources that will make this effort a little bit easier for you. If you can go to the next slide, Mark. And one of the ways in which you can do that is through the Catholics Confront Global Poverty website. It's an organization that has sort of created in partnership between CRS, Catholic Relief Services, and the USCCB, and it has as one of its resources at the Catholics Confront Global Poverty website sort of a how-to, basically, lots of guides. So one of these things is, how do you meet with Congress, as you can see here on the screen. And if you click on that, you can go to the next slide. It provides a lot of resources to help you do this. So how to set up a meeting in your district. Tips for a successful meeting. What is it that you want to really achieve, and how do you sort of spell those kind of achievements out before you go in, and how do you measure their success after you leave? It provides talking points. Here, right now, they have talking points on human trafficking, on the Syria situation, Syrian refugees, and on climate change. And these are all kind of guides that you can use to help frame your meeting and to help, give you confidence when you go in, and to make sure that you know what to say and how to say it in a way that's going to be effective, hopefully. And then, of course, is really, really important after you meet with Congress or congressional members or staff members who are engaged on this issue, is to tell us about your visit. How did it go? Who did you meet with? What issues were discussed? Because that provides us intelligence that we can use when we do follow-up meetings with those same congressional representatives. So being in contact between sort of our Washington, D.C. headquarters office and your sort of the local communities in this regard, your engagement with Congress feeds into our engagement with Congress, because we can highlight your meetings when we meet with them, and do other sorts of things to help raise the profile of what you did and help to reaffirm the issues that we are, both interested in through our political advocacy activities. So, you can, obviously, there's an opportunity to tell us what you did through this particular website, but you can also email, and I would suggest that you do if you meet with representatives on the issue of immigration or refugees. In this case, you drop a note to Tony and let him know who you met with and give him some information, and maybe he can just talk to you and he'll take notes or whatever it might be, just so that we know so that we can move forward. I'll stop with it there, and happy to take questions now or at the end of the webinar if anyone has it, or obviously down the road. Before I actually stop, one thing that always pops into my mind at the end is when we create these resources, we want to make sure that they're good for you and that they're useful. And so please, anytime, let us know what kind of resources that you can use on your local level. If we're not producing the stuff that you need and that you want, we're not doing our job, and we're not being very helpful. And our first priority is to help you do a better job, to become more informed, to provide you with the tools that you need on your local level to kind of sort of make what you're trying to do more successful. And so all you need to do is tell Tony or email me or email Mark or Ashley or whoever, and let us know what kind of stuff you would like to see us produce, and we'll certainly do what we can to make sure that we're able to do so. So I'll end there, and again, I'm happy to take questions now or later on.
Great. Thank you, Todd. Todd, you set it up really nicely. There, well, first off, there are like almost 10 questions in line here. So the Sister Leonette, to answer your question, the PowerPoint will be available, and we'll have it on the justiceforimmigrants.org page, and we'll provide you a link with that. Let's see here. We'll also make that link available via our social media pages, which is for Twitter, it's at USCCB JFI, and then on Facebook, it's Justice for Immigrants, facebook.com/Justice for Immigrants. Let's see here. Todd, we're also going to have the link for the toolkit, aren't we?
Yes, it should be up. It should be live now on the JFI website.
Okay.
Under Take Action, I believe it is. There's a World Refugee Day link where the National Migration Week link is also, and that'll provide a direct link to where you can access and download the toolkit. Very good. Thank you, Todd. Elizabeth, thank you for hopping on in West Virginia there. How about you give me a call? I'll just respond to your email with my telephone number, and we can talk a little bit about some of the other ideas and activities that you can carry out to engage parishes and other community groups on World Refugee Day. So let me respond to your email, and we'll get back to you. Let's see here. Darwinski, I'm going to have to pull you back in here. I have a question from Elena Garcia. She asks, what happens to Central American minors that are not approved as refugees?
Yeah, happy to take that. So the individuals which are not approved as refugees, a majority of them, about 98 to 99%, have been approved as parolees. The issue with the categorization of parolee is that the access to benefits once the Central American minor child gets stateside are somewhat limited, i.e. they are not able to access certain services from a resettlement agency to assist with the acculturation process. So that's one of the concerns that we have. The second is with the large number of parolees which are being approved, is that the framework of this program was never established for it to be a parolee program. It was supposed to be a refugee program and an avenue to decrease the number of children which were migrating from the Northern Triangle and coming up through Central America and coming to the U.S. Illegally. And by virtue of seeing so many parolees being adjudicated and approved in that manner, I think that the Trump administration probably has their eyes on what to do with this program. And our main concern is, as we go into the next fiscal year, will we actually have a Central American minor program as it exists today, given the high number of parolee approvals in comparison with the refugee approvals?
Very good. Thank you, Darwinski. And folks, if you have any more questions, we're happy to take them. Again, please type your questions in the chat box there, on the lower left-hand corner of your monitor. You'll see it. I'm just about ready to hit enter here, where I'm encouraging folks to ask more questions. Okay, and we'll get to them when we can. Next up, I want to ask the communications manager for Migration and Refugee Services, Mark Preisman, to talk about ways that you can involve media and other sources of news and information into World Refugee Day. Mark, go ahead.
Thanks, Tony, and hope everyone's having a good afternoon. So one of the big things, I mean, I don't need to tell anyone who's on this call that refugees and immigration is obviously a hot-button topic right now. And while what we'll see over the next month or so with the court order, or with the executive orders going through the courts, is we'll see a renewed interest in them. As you can probably see from media coverage over the last few weeks, since the second EO came out, the first couple of weeks there was a lot of coverage, and it's kind of died down a little bit. This is a great year to get the focus back on World Refugee Day and the events that you're doing in your local community. Getting the local media involved, whether it's let's say that you live in the Chicago area, whether it's getting the Chicago Tribune or the local, your local paper, whether it's a town of 30, 40, 50,000 and they have a paper, no article is too big or too small, or no outlet is too big or too small, and neither is an event. Anytime that we can get eyes on anything, it's a good thing. And we're happy to help reach out. I've worked in the media on a local and national level over the past 15 years, and am happy to help reach out if there are contacts that you may not have, or reinforce what you are doing in your local areas. One of the ways to do it, if you don't have a contact, there's usually for TV and radio stations, there's usually a contact us button that you can go to. And one of the things that you'll do is you'll explain, a little bit about your event, or send it to the newsroom. If you can mock up a media alert or a press release, and I'm happy to give you examples of those, if you were to mock something like that and send it to the powers that be, it's going to get their eyes on it. So with all the renewed focus that'll be on it, coming up in, especially starting next month, this year's World Refugee Day is going to be something that we should be able to have a lot of coverage on. I'll take myself to the next slide. We would also like to know about your events. As you guys go through the planning process, we would love to highlight them on social media, on the JFI website, so that not only does it give people in other communities an idea of what they may be able to do, but it gives us an ability to highlight what everyone else is doing, and so that you're getting more eyeballs on your event. Here in DC, we are in the planning process of getting a couple different things going. We haven't formalized any specific event, but we do have a couple things that we're working on. As we get more details on that, we will let you know. But we're also creating a map that we will put on the JFI website that'll have links to everyone's different events. So it'll have the date of the event, and while World Refugee Day is June 20th, if you do it the weekend before or the weekend after, that's completely okay. We know not everyone can take time out of their Tuesday to do it. So if you give us the name of the event, a little bit about it, the date, and how people can contact information, we'll be able to put that up on the map so that people can go onto the JFI website and see the different events that they have and show their support for it. As you can see, I put my contact information up here on this slide. These slides will be up on the JFI website after the webinar is over, so don't worry about writing it down. It'll be plastered all over the site. Finally, sharing it on social media. it's free. It's free, and it hits more people than you could ever imagine. What we're using right now is the hashtag WRD for World Refugee Day 2017, and that'll enter you into the conversation, whether that's on Facebook, whether that's on Twitter, whether that's on Instagram. We've got all of our information on how to find us on social media, not only for JFI, which we have both the Facebook and the Twitter account, but also the MRS Twitter feed. And as we get closer, USCCB will focus a little bit on World Refugee Day as well, and they've got a bigger following than we do. So what we want to hear from you, and there's no event that's too big, no event that's too small. Just let us know how we can help, whether that's contacting the media, promoting it, in a newsletter or whatever, and we're happy to help. So that's pretty much what I have. Tony?
Great. Thank you, Mark. Todd, I think this question is for you. Do you have a list of examples of what various cities do or have done for World Refugee Day events?
Yeah, I mean, as Mark mentioned, I mean, there's a number of things that people have done in the past. Oftentimes people will hold prayer services, people will hold masses in honor of World Refugee Day, and to an opportunity to reflect on refugees. There are some local events that people do. I know that they've done like sort of ice cream socials that just sort of bring people in the community together and gives them an opportunity to get individuals in a confined location so you can speak to them while at the same time bribing them with ice cream or some other kind of delight. There's anything that will provide an opportunity to pull people together. It's pizza, ice cream. You can do a panel at your local parish or at your local school that will highlight individuals, refugees who have come to the United States and have, been successful and contribute on a regular basis. It's important also, I think, if you have a panel or something like that on a local community level, to bring in local business leaders as a really good way, because, if the local business leader can speak to the way in which refugees have supported and helped, businesses in the local area, help to create jobs, to create, consumption, which will lead to the creation of more jobs, that sort of thing. That's a beneficial way to approach, an event like that. And it also provides, when you get a lot of people together, as I've mentioned, it provides an opportunity to distribute resources and to talk to them directly about the issue. I mean, as Mark mentioned earlier, when we create this map and we start populating it with events, that will also, hopefully give people ideas as we move forward as to what they can do in general. I mean, hopefully we'll have, events coming in we've started to get word of things that are going on, but hopefully, by the end of April, the beginning of May, as things start to solidify. So I would really urge you all to, once we get that out, we'll send a notification and, urge you to check it out every once in a while to get a sense of what's going on.
Great. Thanks, Todd. And, folks, just to add to what Mark was saying, he was encouraging you to, draft something or send a letter to the editor. A lot of you folks live in dioceses where you have, very good diocesan newspapers. So, if you're at an event or you want to write a letter to your editor, I mean, I think that was Todd who mentioned that, you should consider sending your letter to the editor or inviting a reporter from your diocesan newspaper to your event. And on a smaller scale, if you want to write something to fill some space in your parish bulletin, and you have a story about a refugee, or you want to make a point about refugees during World Refugee Day or that week. I'm sure your parish priest, your pastor, would enjoy taking some time off from having to write his weekly column or not write so much, right? So those are other activities that you might want to consider. Just to lift up and to raise more awareness, within your parish or your diocese about World Refugee Day. we still have a little bit of time here, and if you folks have any more questions, we're happy to take them. We, Todd and Mark and Darwincy can also add other, if they had other points that they wanted to bring up that, maybe they thought weren't as important or they didn't think we'd have enough time. You guys are welcome to bring up those as well.
Sure. I would just respond to Sister Andrea, her last question regarding whether there's a program that has funding for local groups to do an event. I think what you're referring to is when I was speaking of the POWER program. The POWER program provides funding to local kind of parishes through a competitive grant process. So every year, I believe it is, there's a call for proposals. I think it usually probably occurs in late winter, maybe even before that, maybe the fall at some point. I can have Daniel Sturm talk to you all a little bit about it or get word out through the JFI campaign. But anyway, they will provide funding, seed money to help local parishes to create programs that will engage refugees who live within their community as a mechanism to help them, to integrate, to feel at home, to kind of acculturate within the local community. So I think that's what it was. Unfortunately, we don't have at the moment funding for World Refugee Day related programs, like a grant process. Although I will take this opportunity to try to highlight the fact that we're trying to pull together funding for National Migration Week for a small grant program. We've done it in the past, and it would provide resources, seed money for you to put on educational or religious oriented events in your local community, sort of, and the springboard would be National Migration Week. If we're able to do so, we'll probably send word out about that in the coming month or two, with a deadline probably in early fall, October, or sometime around there. So that's something to keep on your radar, because I think it points sort of is more apropos to what you're talking about, if I understand your question properly.
Thank you, Todd. And Sister Andrea, I did not see your question because I didn't scroll down far enough, so I apologize, but Todd answered it better than I can, and I hope all is well in Tiffin, Ohio. Let's see here. Anthony, thank you for the nice tip about refugeeresponse.org in Cleveland. Let's see here. Ooh. Here's a question. Is it possible to have a binational campaign, for example, between U.S. and Mexico for World Refugee Day?
I think, I'm sort of, this is Todd again, I'll just sort of talk off the top of my head at the moment. It would probably be difficult for us to pull anything together this year in particular, just because it would probably take some planning. But if you're talking about, I think that there would be certainly possibilities there for the future, number one, both between the U.S. and Mexico, but also the U.S. and Canada, potentially. But one area that could possibly be possible is border kind of dioceses. I know that they're very much engaged with each other on both sides of the border. The bishops are directly. And there's definitely, I think, some promise that could emerge, at least in the short term, related to these kind of cross-border diocesan celebrations, both in the U.S. and in Mexico, and that could be something that could be built on as we move into the future. I mean, it's a good idea insofar it would help to demonstrate solidarity between the two countries, but really between the Catholic Church in both countries in particular. That is a transnational church that we inhabit and not merely a national church, and that's always important to, I think, emphasize and to reassert just that simple reality, because it changes the dynamic when you really see things through that lens.
Thanks, Todd. That's helpful. And Sister Andrea, again, and Tiffin, Ohio makes a great point that, if there could be some sort of, not for this, obviously not this National World Refugee Day, but perhaps in future ones, at the northern border because of, seemingly Canada's much more open refugee acceptance process, that might draw more attention as well as, more supporters. So thank you, Sister Andrea, for that.
Hi, Tony. I noticed that we had a question from Sharon Franklin earlier in the webinar related to, do you have any reason to believe that the Turkish government will allow Syrian refugees with U.S. ties who have gone through all of the steps to have to leave anytime soon? So I'd like to take a stab at that one, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, Sharon, I think the question that you're posing is multifaceted in its response. First and foremost, the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program, i.e., the State Department working with resettlement support centers overseas, specifically in Istanbul and Ankara, and then with UNHCR and the International Office of Migration. These partners work together with the Turkish government to facilitate the travel of refugees. The Turkish government has taken an interesting stance with the Syrians in contrast to the Iraqis, which are living in Turkey, and they have somewhat kind of formed their own UNHCR, which is responsible for refugee status determination and referring refugees to various resettlement states, not only the U.S., but to other resettlement states, for example, Canada, Australia, the Nordics. So Turkey definitely wants to try to facilitate the travel of Syrian refugees and facilitate and make sure that refugees that have U.S. ties in various countries abroad can join their relatives. I think that for the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program, it becomes a little bit more nuanced given the fact that we have a pretty explicit security screening and vetting process, which is more extensive than many other resettlement states. And by virtue of that, sometimes the process in which the Syrians are undertaking in Turkey to reunite with their family members, even though their case has been referred to the United States, the process of it being approved after the various parties in the U.S. government have stated that, this Syrian national is not a terrorist and facilitates that refugees travel to the U.S. can take a substantial amount of time. So just for an approximate timeline for you, refugees which are traveling from Syria and are in Turkey are typically there anywhere between 3 to 5 years. That's time of arrival to time of departure to the third country. And a lot of that, again, when a refugee enters into the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program, it just takes a significant amount of time for them to be processed and for them to get stateside. But their priority, yes, is to make sure that those refugees are reuniting with family members and friends here in the U.S.
Great, thank you, Darwincy. That's really helpful. That was a tough question. I guess I scrolled down too fast, so apologize for missing that, Sharon. Todd, there looks like there's a question here. Can you go over real quickly again about the community engagement portion of event planning and event organizing?
Sure. I mean, so there's, in the toolkit itself, there are a number of, I covered a couple of different things that we highlight in the toolkit. There are a number of other sort of bullet points or suggestions that are laid out in the toolkit, many of them which have samples, sort of examples on other websites or related, at other parts of the USCCB website or diocesan websites that will hopefully be helpful to spur kind of interest or kind of brainstorming on your part as to what you can do effectively and reasonably within your own local community or parish. So I was just trying to highlight a few things, but I would really urge you all to check out the toolkit, where there are a number of other alternatives. And to be, what's nice about this toolkit is that it's digital. We can always add more. So if you have really good examples of what you have done in the past, or if you know of things or have sort of thoughts on best practices in terms of community engagement, let Tony know. Send it to our JFI email, because we can always expand on these suggestions within the toolkit, or connected to the World Refugee Day website or the National Migration Week website, so on and so forth. So this is kind of like sort of a first stab that we hope over the coming years will grow and will kind of become sort of new resources that are standalone and which will be beneficial to you all when you're planning your own events.
Great. Thanks, Todd. So, folks, let's see here. We have another 2 or 3 minutes before the top of the hour. That gives us a little bit of time for more questions. So, if you have any other questions, please. We blocked off this this 1 o'clock hour Eastern time for you all and for this webinar. Please go ahead and type any other questions you have in the chat box.
I would also, let me add one other thing. I'm just looking at Alex's question right now. If he has ideas, in terms of information on how to plan for the actual event, a lot of it depends upon what you're trying to plan, what kind of activity, what kind of events you're trying to plan with respect to it. Whether it's a direct community kind of events like a forum where you invite people, or a prayer service, or a mass. These are all obviously different types of events. And so it would be helpful, I guess, if you wanted to talk further about possible avenues that you would want to go down in your own local community, to get a better sense of what kind of event you want to plan, or what kinds of things you would want to do. And I think that those among us here, hopefully would have some helpful suggestions as well as what's in the toolkit already.
Yeah, Angela, you had a question about, cultural exchange types of events. It could run the gamut. I mean, you can choose to, for example, address some of the, in your World Refugee Day event, and I'll throw this as an example. You can choose to address, some of the myths that are out there, about refugees, and Darwinski can talk ad nauseum about how much vetting a lot of our refugees, most all of our refugees have actually that come into the United States. So we have a wealth of resources available on the Justice for Immigrants websites, but to supplement that even more is going to be this toolkit. So I'm happy to talk with you as well offline. I provided my email there in the chat box. This is Tony Kube. Feel free to reach out to me, and we can have a longer discussion on it.
I would add further as well. It wasn't meaningfully absent. I guess there's two things. There are different types of events as well. You can have a one-off event that happens on World Refugee Day or surrounding it. You could also have an event or a sort of an activity that may be longer lasting. One of the things you could, a parish could do was try to develop a relationship with a sister or brother parish in Latin America that's experiencing all type of violent upheavals that are leading to refugee flows. And that could be, you could sort of initiate that on World Refugee Day and somehow, kind of develop that over time so that you have this kind of cultural exchange between your parish here in the United States and a parish in Latin America, where visits may occur between people who are part of each parish, respectively. So I certainly think that there could be a wide range of things, and we're not trying to restrict anyone or any sort of types of suggestions. We would like to hear more as to what you would think would be a good idea and include them. We've brainstormed certain possibilities, but it's certainly not exhaustive.
Great, thank you, Todd. And with that, we're after 2 o'clock. So I want to thank our presenters, Todd Scribner, Darwincy Clark, and Mark Priceman here at the USCCB, my wonderful colleagues. Thank you all for spending an hour with us. We will have these resources, including the World Refugee Day toolkits and this PowerPoint presentation from the webinar here, as well as the audio recording. It will be posted on the justiceforimmigrants.org website. You can find it there. If you all have any questions, my email is in the chat box. Feel free to send me a note, and I'm pretty good, almost always every day, about getting back to email. So I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. But in the meantime, thank you all for being on the webinar today, and thank you to the presenters. And we want to wish you all a blessed Holy Week and the upcoming Easter weekend. Thank you all. Take care.